Hi everyone, Bernard here. I hope you're all staying safe and well, and welcome to the Citizen channel and another version, another episode. And yeah, there might be quite a few of these. I've been looking into it since I did the first one. Of course, we're talking City at the movies, aren't we? So obviously this is the second one I put together following the Blue Moon Rising one. So I've been having a look round, seeing what there is, and there's certainly enough stuff out there to do at least 7 or 8 episodes of this, so we'll see how much we can get out of it. There might be stuff I've not found yet. I've only had a sort of brief look through, and we do have to cheat a little bit. I mean, it wasn't a movie this as such, it was a documentary, of course, and of course we're going to look at that very famous documentary from 1981. Yeah, this 40 years ago as I'm recording this, but say it just feels like yesterday to me, and I lived through it. But there you go, so very poignant. So we're going to look at that little documentary that Granada put together called City, simply called City with an apostrophe at the end or whatever it is, whatever that mark is, that exclamation mark. That's it, isn't it? Not an apostrophe. So yeah, City. That's simple. That's all you need to say. There's only one city, isn't there? Let's be honest about it. So we're going to have a look at that today. Please, if you're new to the channel, push that subscribe button, push the bell notification, and please check out my film and TV stuff as well, film and TV channel. And please, all comments are very, very welcome on this or anything to do with City. Doesn't matter what it is. And if you follow or friend me on Facebook and Twitter, there's some links on screen there. I do have a little website as well for posters and DVDs, moviegamenostalgia.com. So you can have a look at that anytime. That'll be wonderful. But today, yeah, the old City at the movies. Well, City on the telly. Yeah, it's a poetic license. We are allowed to use these things, aren't we? I did watch this originally. I think it actually aired at 10:30 p.m. it was in 2 parts. I'm not too sure it was on consecutive nights or consecutive weeks, but it was aired on Granada on 10:30 p.m. on Monday, February the 9th, yeah, 1981. So as I said, it was a part 1 and part 2, and I don't think it was all shown in one night, so but I'm not sure of the logistics of it. But it's out there on YouTube, and I'm sure many of you have watched it. It's you younger ones, if you've not felt the need to watch it, I think it's quality. I think it still stands up really well with stuff now, to be honest with you. And I did at the time watched it, and I enjoyed it. I loved it at the time. Obviously, a lot of familiar things there. I mean, I've been in the boardroom, I've been into Main Road, I'd seen all those sort of inner sanctum, if you like. So that was all familiar to me as I watched it in 81. But looking back now, 40 years later, and I have watched bits and bobs of it over the years as well. So. So this isn't the second time I've watched it, but I went out of the way to watch it again. It must probably be about half a dozen times probably over the years I've watched it. Keep going back to it because it's still good now. I mean, I watched it and at the time I remember it was about 52 minutes, yeah. So if you think it's two parts, obviously it would have been 30 minutes on ITV, but take out the adverts. In those days, you didn't get all the adverts you get now. So it was probably about 26 minutes in total, something like that. So obviously in 2 parts, it was 52 minutes. So yeah, I mean, it was very, very watchable then, and it's very, very watchable now. And as I say, I still enjoy watching it, even again, as I said, not for the first time. I mean, Granada were extremely fortunate, were they? I mean, did things work out as they did because Granada were there? Who knows? We're talking 2 very big egos at the time, aren't we? At the start of this, you're talking Mr. Malcolm Allison, you're talking Mr. Peter Swales, and Mr. Peter Swales wasn't averse to getting his thoughts on camera, and he would have got a bit of a rush from doing this sort of thing, I think, and perhaps some of his directors might have not have done, but certainly Swales, you can imagine, would have done, and certainly wouldn't have bothered Malcolm Allison, that's for sure. Yeah, so whether things panned out because of this or after, I don't know. Who made the decision at what stage to go into this? But I mean, they couldn't have started with a better time, really, could they? And they couldn't have started the programme with a better match, probably. Obviously, as we look through it, the critics loved it as well. I mean, Mirror's Frank McGee described it as arguably the most accurate telling and compelling picture of professional soccer I've ever seen. Miles Kington in the Times called City a superb drama which just happened to be drawn from real life. There were warnings before the programme about offensive language. It wasn't too bad, certainly not compared to this day and age, but yeah, so there was warnings before. A very posh-spoken gentleman puts a warning that there's going to be some some rather offensive language because of the passion involved. So I mean, yeah, a bit like that. But there you go. And as I said, it started off with a Liverpool game. So what more could you ask, really? If you're going to start with a game, and City were what, rock bottom, no, third bottom, I think. We hadn't won a game, but we managed to be third bottom at the time. And obviously, as it actually starts with the Liverpool game, but before that, you get a little brief look at what's going to be in it. So I mean, as I say, it's and then it does a sort of goes back in time just a little bit. And of course, it starts with the game with Liverpool on the 4th of October 1980, and of course we got our usual panning. Very positive, Malcolm Allison, always very positive. Obviously, a lot of the players look young, and they were young, weren't they? You got rid of a lot of our experienced players, unfortunately, didn't you? That's where, you know, that was the big mistake. Most City fans, we still think to this day. And we got our usual 4-0 panning. So it wasn't the greatest to start. Of course, Liverpool were only second then. I think they'd won the title the year before, but Bob Paisley's Liverpool. And there's 41,000 at that game. So the atmosphere don't quite come over on the TV. They show actual highlights from the programme and actual highlights, if you like, from the camera work, from the actual documentary itself. And it's just great to see the familiar scenes. As I said, I sort of knew a lot about Main Road anyway. I've been in and out of Main Road. I've been in the boardroom 3 or 4 times over the years and stuff like that. So it was just great again to look at it now. As I said, I've not watched it for 3 or 4 years perhaps. And it was great to look at the Platt Lane as well. I mean, obviously the amount of time I must have passed that Platt Lane training complex when the players were training, or when it was just empty. It just was hundreds and hundreds. I mean, I used to work in Manchester, and I used to live in Withington, so I used to get the bus to work in the morning. I used to obviously not see anyone there at that time, but obviously coming home I used to perhaps see people, see something happening and stuff like that, and obviously I'd rather walk up occasionally and watch them train, as a lot of the fans did at that time. So it's great to look in and around the Platt Lane complex as well as Main Road. Yeah, I mean, getting back to the actual documentary itself, obviously it doesn't pull any punches. I mean, you more or less know from the start that Swales is going to give him, obviously after the Liverpool loss, I think he was given 2 games then. He was, he had to we had Leeds away and West Bromwich Albion away. So obviously he more or less said that's it. If you don't do it, that's all there is to it. And it was the Leeds night game. I mean, that wasn't the greatest, friendliest place to go at night, till over to Ellen Road, but a crowd of 19,000. So it wasn't a massive crowd, but it's good to see all the City fans in the core in that standing bit. If you remember the layout of it, it was in the far corner. And obviously I like the little camera work and stuff, because it was sort of, you didn't really hear the home fans, you just heard the City fans singing the odd songs, etc, etc. And then of course did he tell a pork pie, Mr. Swells, because he said he had a couple of games, but after this Leeds game, the day after, there we go, we've got Tony Buck sat next to him, saying they've offered their resignations. I think, to be honest with you, if I was Malcolm Allison, I'd say, you'll have to sack me, mate. I'm not resigning. But they different times perhaps. I mean, certainly with Swales, I wouldn't have took. Well, you probably would. I was a young man, I say at that time, but so I probably would have took it myself. But if I'd been Malcolm Allison, just sack me, mate. You're not going to get away without paying me enough compensation, etc, etc. But anyway, we don't know the ins and outs of that, do we? And it switches to a shot of, Tony Buck and Swales announcing to the press, obviously, that what's happened, that Allison and Buck have stepped down. And then, of course, giving Tony Buck, sort of telling him he's going to sort of take over till a new manager comes in. And then you get the great shots, don't you, of the Platt Lane training ground, where obviously Allison is saying goodbye to a very young set of players. I mean, some of the guys who hadn't even broke into the first team that became sort of City regulars as well. It's fantastic to watch that. And then, of course, he doesn't mess about, does he? He gets on to Mr. John Bond. I don't think there's many other managers in the frame. I think they only sort of had John Bond, and obviously we saw snippets of the interview. We didn't see all the interview, of course. I remember at the time, not liking John Bon that much. I mean, I liked him as a manager when he was there doing his stuff, because obviously he pulled us round, etc. And, you know, John Bon, we love you and all this sort of thing. But when I watched this programme, yeah, I sort of just felt it was a bit up himself. But I mean, looking back now, you know, 40 years later, I think it's fair enough what he says to the players, etc. It's strange how he, as age makes you think of things differently. So of course. It shows that, and it shows John Bon accepting. I think we had to pay compensation, half of what it was. I think it was 200,000 Norwich City wanted at the time. I think we ended up paying 100,000, which we probably didn't have a go. Would have had to rent it and sell a few tellies, didn't it, Swales, to cover that. But there you go. And obviously Bon meets the players, and that's where I'm saying about, you know, call me boss and things. At the time, I probably thought that was a bit arrogant, but I think it's spot on now. I don't have nothing wrong with that whatever. And finding them with the late, finding them if they don't wear a tie and stuff like this. So yeah, I think my sort of attitude to John Bon changed a little bit. As I said, I didn't mind him as a manager. Obviously, it all ended in tears, as it usually did with City managers at the time. But yeah, he gave us a good run, didn't he? Let's be honest about it. And of course, it goes on to feature, and they try and make a point of the fact that City had to play West Brom in the quarter final of the League Cup. And basically, because of the guys John Bonder brought in, the Jerry Gowes and the Tommy Hutchinsons, obviously couldn't play in that, could they? Because they were cup tied. So they made a point of fact he was playing against West Brom with Malcolm Allison's team, basically. Obviously, we did manage to win that game, but yeah, it was very. Don't mess about. I loved his tactics as well. The tactics, most City fans at the time, and certainly most City fans up to early days of Pep, were probably the same. You know, welly it, get it clear, don't mess about with it. That was his notes to the players if he was stuck on the edge of the box or something. Just welly it into space on the wing. You know, just get it clear. Just get the opponents running backwards. So I mean, that was probably our philosophy and most clubs' philosophies, wasn't it? But he certainly wouldn't have got any complaints from City fans, that's for sure. So yeah, so it showed that. And then obviously it jumps a little bit then. And obviously, again, gold dust, wasn't it, for Granada, that we actually drew. I mean, I'm not sure how this documentary would have panned out if this hasn't happened, whether it would have been something totally different, I'm not too sure. But absolute gold dust for Granada as we draw Crystal Palace in the FA Cup. And of course, Malcolm Allison's the then Crystal Palace manager, not for much longer. You know, he didn't last very long, but at that stage. So yeah, I mean, obviously I was at that game. Obviously I was at all the games in this season, not all the away games, quite a few of the away games, but I'd obviously we just found out we were yeah, by the February, yeah, I think we were expecting my first daughter by then. So obviously I wasn't swanning off to as many away games as I'd hoped to. But there you go. And anyway, that's by the by. As I say, I went to this Palace game. As I said, of course it shows that wonderful thing where he runs on the pitch and he does milk it. This is with the attitude in the Kippax, or on the Kippax that day, was we were willing to sort of just clap him politely and thank him if you like. But the fact he run on with all the press around him with his arms raised up, etc., etc., it just wound us up. It wound me up and it wound a lot of City fans up. And that's when we belted out Johnny Bon, which is caught on obviously on this documentary. As he made a quick exit, obviously back to his technical area, if you like, or back to the little huts they have, or whatever they were at Main Road, the little benches. So yeah, this is it. I would say it was actually gold dust that Granada picked on that, of course, and it was actually gold dust that obviously that just shows that, you know, fans weren't. What's the word you can use? I mean, obviously, if you just watch that documentary without being there, you think, oh, that's nice of them, isn't it? But there's more to it than that. You have to read between the lines. If you just said it was the fact that he wanted to milk it, and the fact that obviously we were struggling a little bit, and a lot of the fans weren't unhappy to see him go because of how he decimated the older players, got rid of some of our older, more experienced players. So, you know, we were willing to give him a little bit of respect, but he just took it too far, unfortunately. That's typical of Malcolm Allison, wasn't it? And of course, it has him showing him when obviously we win the game 4-0, and it has him obviously after the game locking the changing room door and putting something in front of it so no one can come in, and literally just sits in the quiet. And obviously they have the juxtaposition there of the City dressing room where John Bon's quite cheerful, etc., etc. And just sort of the last 5 minutes of this documentary, Malcolm Allison just sort of comes into the City changing room just to sort of say well done to John Bond and obviously the City players, but it's literally 5 or 10 seconds, and he sort of, it's quite sad really, and then he just walks back out, Alisson, which quite poignant in a way, because I don't know what he expected. It must have been hard for him to do it, but what you expected, I don't know. He just yeah, okay, cheers, but and then he just, obviously, whether he expected the players to leap on him and say, please come back, Alisson, I don't know, but he probably didn't. But there you go. And then you just finished them with, obviously, after the match, obviously the managers would get together with the chairman and a couple of directors of the board and just have a chat and a cup of tea, or something a bit stronger sometimes. And it sort of more or less finished with that, where they were chatting about each other. Obviously, John Bond was talking about Alisson and the fact he needed someone to control him and stuff like this. And I think most people would agree. I mean, as I say, all John Bond had done with that City team that Alisson had was put experience back into it, and that's why we ended up going, I think, winning 10 games out of 13 when John Bond took over. He lost his first game, and then we went on a good run. So that was a problem with Alisson. He didn't like that. Didn't like someone above him. He thought he could do it all. Unfortunately, he was never as good just as a manager without that someone keeping an eye on him and keeping him under control. So yeah, it ended with that, and John Bond's being honest. And obviously you could tell there's a bit of obviously they were best friends at one time, but over the years he drifted apart, and Alisson has said some horrible things about Bond. So all credit to John Bond in the bit we saw anyway. He sort of stood up and said things that weren't unfair about Alisson, and we saw a sort of very quiet Alisson, a very philosophical Alisson, I think, at the end of the day. And that's more or less where the documentary ended, with I think the comments from the commentator was obviously mentioned that Alisson would get sacked about 55 days later or something like that from Palace. And of course John Bond had a couple of Wembley targets, didn't he? Saying we didn't unfortunately make it in the League Cup, but we did make it in the FA Cup. But yeah, great. It's a great documentary. As I said, when I watched it originally, I just wanted it to go on a lot longer. When I watched it again last night before I did this, I just wanted it to go on longer. It's just brilliant. But it's just such a memory rush for us guys as well of my age to see it. And if you're not familiar with Main Road, it's good little thing of looking at Main Road, which hopefully we'll get to see a bit more of while they do these little city at the movies. Anyway, we'll get to see different parts of Main Road as well. So you might even see the Etihad, because it's city at the movies. It's not Main Road at the movies. So there might even be a little Etihad thing thrown in as well for good measure. But well, we have had the Etihad. We had the Etihad in what was it, in the original, didn't we, in the Blue Moon Rise? But you know what I mean, there'll be a lot more on Main Road than there will be on the Etihad, because obviously there's lots of bits and pieces that were done at Main Road over the years for films and TV. So yeah, join me for that. Hope you enjoyed that anyway. Let me know in your comments what you think and any sort of special memories it brought back for you. As I said, it's just the age of the players that sort of, certainly, if you give it a watch, just look at that bit where he's saying goodbye at the Platt Lane training ground. That sort of got to me, because some of those players, as I said, that did go on to play as first team players for City, but they were so young and hadn't even broken into the team then. I mean, obviously you're talking the Dave Bennett's of this world, and other players I can't remember. You'll know it when you see it anyway. You'll know it. Andy May, Andy May was there, stuff like that, where they just look so young. But there you go. They're getting on a bit like us now, aren't they? Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Please let me know in your comments. What are we going to do the rest of the day? Have a great one. Look after yourselves. Look after your friends. Look after your families. More importantly, let's all look after each other until we meet here again on the Citizen channel, or perhaps have a look at my film and TV channel. I only ever ask one thing of you. Stay safe, Blues. Come on, City. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.